morning. Me and my tiny ears. My ears are so tiny that the set keeps falling off of them. All right. I call them my little baby ears. Yeah, I'm sorry about the sunlight. Hey, you never know. The people in this row sometimes get a surprise. But the good thing is, I heard the earth is still turning. So, as the earth turns, maybe you'll get a little more comfortable. But do feel welcome to move if you need to. Yeah, it's one of the things we didn't plan on, putting windows so high up into the room. Anyway, okay. Good afternoon, and thanks everybody for being here today. Well, I had an idea of what I was going to talk about yesterday, but then last night that changed. I don't know if anybody saw the news, but there has been an upheaval in the Middle East, and there have been some developments there where there have been an attack on Iran with bombers from the United States. And a few people told me last evening, some people sent me text messages saying that they were praying and they felt worried. And so the Dharma talk that I was going to give yesterday suddenly didn't feel like the right talk to give, because it was going to be about Tibetan language and why it appears in our prayer books. I figured that is not necessarily the talk that folks want to hear today, but I will give it. So now I'm prepared. But so I do feel I need to say a couple things, because some folks might feel a little worried because we don't know what's going to happen in the world. And sometimes we do, because we are so well informed and our media is so ubiquitous, it's everywhere, that sometimes it's hard to avoid. Even if a person would like to take a vacation from the news, they wouldn't necessarily even be able to do that. So I wanted to use some of my time this morning to talk a little bit about how we work with our mind when times are difficult, and so that's kind of where I wanted to go today, was to talk about how to work with our minds when things are difficult and we have worries. So that's where we're going to begin, because I think of this place, and I think of this room, and I think of all of you who come to this room and you meditate in this room. And I saw lots of people meditating today, and it felt really nice, to take a peek in the doorway and see everybody sitting and giving each other the silent support of their meditation practice. And I remember what it was like to be in here yesterday. We had a much smaller group, maybe only 10 of us, but it was the room felt really good. And we did a little one-day meditation retreat, which was sort of fun. So when I think about all the goodness and sincerity you bring to this room, and I think about, what this place represents, and the Buddha's basic teachings, which are about equanimity, love, compassion, nonviolence, and so on, it kind of makes me feel like I want to sort of return to basics and be present with all of you in the midst of this situation. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. Yeah. I'm warning the people in this row. Yeah, you might get a little sunshine. I have to figure that out sometime. It's an engineering problem. I'll have to figure it out. So we're going to begin with a prayer. There's a refuge prayer at the beginning, and we'll recite it twice in English and once in Tibetan. And we'll think about, because I'm going to mention refuge during the talk. Good morning. I'm going to mention it during the talk, and I think as you read the words in English, you'll get a flavor for what I'm going to say about them in just a little bit. So again, 2 times in English, and then I'll chant it once in Tibetan, okay? All right. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And so now I'll recite it in Tibetan. O Sanjay Chudan Soji Chodnamla Jang Chu Pardu Dani Kyap Suchi Daji Jin Soji Pe Sunam Ki Drola Penshir Sanjay Truparsho. Okay, thank you very much. I'll recite another short prayer and then we'll begin. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche, Tagi Chiwar Pede Ten Shala, Kadrin Jembo Gwane Je Sunte, Kursum Tugging a Drup Sal Tuso. Okay, thank you. So the topic I chose for today, late last night, when the news changed everything, was sort of about cultivating what is worthwhile. The word worthwhile stuck with me. What is worthwhile in the midst of the situation we're finding ourselves in? What is genuine? What is worthwhile? What is not genuine? What is fine to leave aside? And I chose this particular topic because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, the founder of our center, gave 2 lectures that became the book, Excellent at the Beginning. And the first set of lectures was called Embracing What is Genuine. Embracing What is Genuine. And then the other one was called Abandoning What Was Not Worthwhile. So embracing what's genuine, abandoning what was not worthwhile. And it was about the choice we have to make in our mind all the time. We have to make a choice in our mind every moment of every day. Are we going to embrace what is genuine, or are we going to embrace what is not worthwhile? And what are we going to do with our minds? Because I guess you could say our minds and our attention and our mindfulness and our attentiveness, you could say that's our most precious resource. It's what all of those companies pay so much money for, to advertise to us. They want our attention, right? They pay big money so that we can pay attention to their advertisements or to their ideas. But our mind and our attention really belongs to us. It belongs to us. And how do we reclaim that attention? How do we take care of our mind and put our attention where it's valuable? And how do we take charge of our own heart and our own mind? And so it's, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a little difficult when we're so connected to the news and everyday happenings that sometimes we get notices on our phone about headlines and what's going on in the world and so forth and so on. And it's a little hard to avoid that. So how can we embrace what is genuine when we're busy being distracted all the time by this idea and this idea and this idea and this idea? My friend, the brain scientist, she and I talked about this, and it's like our attention span is so short now because our attention is so chopped up. I'm not blaming TikTok. Well, maybe I am blaming TikTok. Maybe I'm blaming humanity that our brains are wired like this. Do you suppose? Maybe it's all of our fault. We're humans who came up with a foolproof way to distract ourselves. I mean, we're inventive. Yeah. So, but because our attention spans are so short and everybody's arguing for our attention, it really is necessary for taking care of our own mind, because we have to take care of our own mind. Nobody else is going to do it for us. And you know, the advertisers and the idea sellers, you know, the people who are selling ideas and selling products, they don't care. You know, so we have to take care of ourselves. You know, they're interested in making money, and I understand that because that's how they make their living. But they don't really care about our mental health and our physical health, and so we have to take care of that ourselves. And so we do this by making informed decisions about what to do with our attention and what to do with our mind. So we have to make informed decisions about that. And one of the ways to do that is to look to the great thinkers and the wise people of the past. Because the great thinkers and wise people of the past figured some of this out already. And so every person will take to or like a certain style of philosophy or a certain style of spirituality or a certain style of practice of that spirituality. So everybody will have their own thoughts about that. But if we study the lineages of the great masters, we will find their ideas for how to reclaim our attention and how to reclaim our mind and how to take care of ourselves and nurture ourselves. In fact, in situations like this, where there's difficulty, there's war, there's worry, sometimes we feel like we need a rescue. Rescue, please. We need a rescue from all of this worry and so on. And believe it or not, this is nothing new, because since this is a Buddhist place and I'm a Buddhist person, I'm going to talk about the founder of our philosophy and teaching, the Buddha Shakyamuni. When he was just a Prince Siddhartha, and he was on his journey of wandering to find a philosophy that would help him with the worries, fears, and concerns that he had, he practiced and studied all of the great teachings of that day. But then he decided he needed to strike out on his own. He needed to go out on his own and practice and work just with his mind and not with philosophy, but with the experience of his own mind. And therefore, he took off from the circle of ascetics he had been practicing with for 6 years after he left home, because once he saw all the suffering of the world, he knew he had to come up with some kind of solution that would help with all the fears, worries, concerns, and difficulties that humanity is facing. So he took off on a spiritual journey and spent the first 6 years practicing asceticism, not eating much, not drinking much, putting himself through all kinds of arduous yoga. He did all kinds of things, but still could not master his mind and still could not come to the solution for suffering. And it was only after he made the choice to leave his ascetic lifestyle, take nourishment, sit in the shade under a tree, and then relax his mind, that he became the illuminated being we call the Buddha, or the awakened one. So even in the time of the Buddha, there was warfare, there was difficulty, there was worry, there was hunger, there was poverty. We had everything. And so the Buddha addressed this when he explained how suffering comes about and how happiness comes about in the mind of an individual by what they choose to dwell on. And I quoted this last week, but I feel it's important to quote it again this week. In the collection of the Buddha's sayings, it starts with the words, "We are what we think." That's a pretty powerful statement. We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. And with our thoughts, we make the world. So each of us has an experience of the world that is unique to us. And that's why every single person is worthy of love and respect, because they all experience the world in their own way. And they all have value because they have a mind, and that mind is currently experiencing something. And they could actually experience even Buddhahood. So the Buddha was egalitarian in that he said that every person, no matter where they came from, no matter whether they were male or female, they could all become Buddhas, just like him. He denied being God because everybody tried to ask him, oh, which of the gods are you? And he said, I'm not a god, I'm not a god. I'm just a person. But then they said, well, then are you an ordinary person? And he said, no, I'm awakened. And what he was awakened to was the knowledge of what brings happiness and what brings suffering. And so in this book of sayings, the Dhamma Pada, let's see if I can spell that, Dhammapada. Okay, yeah, Dhammapada. In the Dhammapada, he says, if we think, speak, and act with an impure mind, suffering follows us. And if we think, speak, and act with a pure mind, happiness follows us. It's a certainty. So this was his basic teaching on karma. We are what we think, although we are rises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make the world. So if we are thinking, speaking, and acting with an impure mind, now what's that? The impure mind, according to the teachings of the Buddha, is the selfish mind, the mind that only cares about itself, the person who only cares about themselves, the mind of selfishness, the mind of me, I. We all know people who are like this. Maybe we were like this. Maybe we're still like this, and we're working on it. I don't know, but you get the idea. Because when we're only worried and concerned for ourselves, we don't mind if we hurt other people to get what we want. Whereas if we are unselfish, we are actually concerned for everyone, because we see everybody as being just like us. Everybody's just like us. They all suffer. Okay, maybe they suffer from different things because of their background or because of their situation in life, but they all suffer, and so we have to see that and feel for that. We have to feel empathy and compassion for everybody because we're all suffering in some way. And so this idea of cultivating an unselfish mind sounds great, but how do you do it? How do you do it? And the Buddha's 4 statements describe this. Do no harm whatsoever. Don't harm yourself, don't harm others. Practice virtue as much as you can. Take care of yourself and benefit others. And tame your mind. That means to practice meditation and mindfulness so that you can tell the difference between what causes happiness and what causes harm. So these are the basic teachings that we, all Buddhists, follow. Do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. That last one's just a summary, so we're lucky. We don't have to worry too much about that one. So we have 3 things we have to remember now. And what happened during the Buddha's lifetime was that because he was such a remarkable person and teacher, people would come to him and place their hands together and essentially profess that they were his followers. They would take refuge in the Buddha, his teaching, and the Dharma community that he represented. And so this practice of taking refuge now continues centuries later. Can you imagine 2,500, maybe it's 2,600 by now, 2,500 years of a lineage of people taking refuge in the Buddha, his teaching, and his community, and it's continued in an unbroken line since then. The reason I bring refuge up is because this is one of the things we can do with our mind when there's trouble and when we worry. Because when we are worried about something, part of us wants to control the outcome. I don't know about you, but that's what happens when I worry. When I worry, I have this magical idea. If I just think about it enough and worry about it enough, reality will somehow change and everything will be wonderful. But it isn't like that. It doesn't, and as my teacher said to me one time, he says, I don't know for sure, he said, but I would venture to say that 95% of everything you worry about never happens. You know, he was just saying it's a big percentage, right? Most of what we worry about never happens. And so he said, look at all the time you are wasting on this worry when you could be doing something constructive. And so, of course, my question to him would have been, well, how? And of course, that's the idea behind taking refuge and practicing meditation. Just last week, we did a refuge ceremony for several people, and it was really fun. It was enjoyable to sit with folks and do the entrance ceremony for people who wish to become Buddhist. They sit in front of the beautiful statue of the Buddha, and they take refuge in their heart and mind in the Buddha as their teacher, the Dharma as their path, and the Sangha, or the community, as their community. And we do this because we all need protection from the dangers of samsara. But the dangers, see, the Buddha called this world of suffering samsara. You know, the world that is full of suffering, he called that samsara, which the word kind of has a connotation of being like an ocean, really big. Samsara is full of suffering, like an ocean is teeming with life. In any case, one of the things we need protection from is not just physical danger. And in fact, it's mostly about spiritual, mental, and emotional danger, the feeling of worry, the feeling of anger, the feeling of resentment, the feeling of jealousy and competition, all of these feelings we have that are dangerous for us. And when I was talking with the librarian downstairs before the talk today, and he mentioned that he had read a story about one of the Chinese masters who had said that when we are worrying about things, we're sort of taking refuge in the wrong things. And, you know, because there are lots of wrong things we can take refuge in, you know, name, fame, money. In fact, I just saw an article in the paper today about social media influencers. Oh my goodness. You know, we take refuge in so many things, thinking those things are what are going to protect us from the worries, fears, and sufferings. But really, in the end, it doesn't seem to work out. We might get a moment of happiness, but then we have a lot more moments of concern and worry. So we have to pick an appropriate source of refuge. And for us, the appropriate source of refuge is really got to be enlightened beings, because they're the ones that have already figured this out. So we can go to them and say, protect me. Now, the Buddha denied being a god, but he's still around, because his teaching was that I think Buddhism and all of the world's major faith traditions believe in life after death, okay? So I think we're all sort of clear about that after the Buddha passed away, he's still out there. Now, where people spend their time after death, and, you know, and how and what they do and what they get up to and all that kind of stuff, that's all different for the different religions. But in Buddhism, the enlightened beings, after they pass away, they do nothing but benefit others in whatever possible way they can. So in a way, you could compare, now this is probably going to get me in trouble, but you could compare the enlightened beings to the idea of, of angels or saints in Christian traditions that are invisible cheerleaders. They kind of, when we ask for them to be present in our lives, when we turn to them and venerate their memory, and so forth. You know, we kind of reflect that within ourselves because our mind takes the shape of whatever's on it. Let's face it. If you're thinking about something beautiful, your mind takes on beauty. If you're thinking of something ugly, your mind takes on ugliness. If your mind is thinking about love and beauty and goodness, then it takes that shape, and anger and hatred and so on, it takes that shape. So the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are there to encourage us to place our attention on positive and good things. I mean, I have a friend who's a Christian minister. Hey there. And we talk about scripture from time to time. And one of my favorite quotes is the one about, you know, whatever is good, whatever is positive and so on, think about these things. Whatever is good and true, think about these things. Because that's going to be our number one refuge and protection from fear, is to take refuge in that which goes beyond the world. And because Buddhists, like everybody else, do believe in a life after death. Therefore, what we do in this life is incredibly important. Because I joke around when I teach about karma. I say karma can be defined by saying what you do a lot, you do a lot. So if we're always doing this thing or that thing, or worried or anxious or angry or whatever, that's what we're going to reflect. The mind takes the shape of whatever is on it. And so what we have to do is start changing that. And the way we do it in the Buddhist tradition, in this particular tradition of Buddhism that we practice here, we practice three things. We practice basic sitting meditation, which helps to calm the mind so that it's not so agitated. And that really helps us because when things go wrong, we can rely on the techniques of basic quiet sitting meditation to calm us down. For example, one of the methods for doing quiet sitting meditation is to be quiet and place your attention on your breath, which your attention will stay there for just a little while, but then it'll kind of wander off into a memory or maybe into a plan or something. But our job as meditators is to notice that and label it thinking, and then return our attention very gently to the breath and think of that as a fresh start to our meditation. And by doing this over and over again with gentleness, we practice gentleness toward ourselves, which I think is a hidden benefit that many people don't recognize in meditation. Because I've met a lot of, well, why don't we call them high achievers? And when they first start meditating, they want to meditate perfectly and like do a performance of perfect meditation. And they actually do themselves a disservice because they get mad at themselves when they wander off. They don't realize that wandering off is what the mind does. And so the sooner we get used to the fact that wandering off is what the mind does and begin to feel compassion and love for that mind that's wandering off, and then gently bringing it back over and over and over again. For all my 12-step friends, I like to say this is a new meaning to keep coming back. You know, just keep coming back. With gentleness and goodness, just keep coming back. And if you can do that, then that gentleness begins to influence our being, the way we are. It becomes how we are. And so that's the first practice we learn here. The second practice that we learn here is compassion meditation. And we cultivate love and compassion for ourselves and for others by using our imagination. In compassion meditation, we imagine on the out-breath that we're sending love and goodness to ourselves and to everyone in the universe. This allows us to practice some love for ourselves, but also to practice some love for the people we are really mad at, and the people that we fear, and the people we just don't like. And because we use our imagination to rehearse something that we would find unimaginable any other way. And so that's what we do in loving kindness meditation. But we also practice something called mantra meditation. And mantra meditation is the use of sacred sounds that go back to the time of the Buddha. And by practicing these sacred sounds, such as the compassion mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, or Om Mani Padme Hum, as the Tibetans pronounce it, right? Om Mani Padme Hum. And this is a version, this is a way of saying the name of the compassion bodhisattva Chenrezig, the bodhisattva of compassion depicted in the large statue on my right, your left. And Chenrezig, with his extraordinary abilities, which are for love and compassion, which are symbolized by his 4 arms. People say 4 arms are weird, and I say, well, people with 4 arms are weird, but people with wings are not weird. Let's talk. So whether it's wings or extra arms, it's, it implies abilities beyond human ability, extraordinary ability. And so Chenrezig, by reciting his name mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum or Om Mani Padme Hum, we cultivate compassion that is actually naturally occurring within us. We have lots of naturally occurring love and compassion, but it's usually not for everybody. We have love and compassion for ourselves, but sometimes we don't have love and compassion for other folks. And then there are people who are like outside the fence of our loving kindness and compassion, and those are people we could actually harm, so we have to be careful. But using our imagination, we can imagine sending love to them in the compassion practice, but in the mantra practice, we can imagine that they are blessed by the compassionate bodhisattva Chenrezig, and they actually become Chenrezi, just for a few minutes. Just for a few minutes. You can imagine your worst enemy as Chenrezig. It can be a game changer. It can be a game changer. So by doing these 3 practices, quiet sitting meditation, compassion meditation, and mantra meditation, we can get some distance from our worry, fear, and concern, and transform our worry, fear, and concern into the meditation. When we are feeling the need, we can breathe and just be present with our breath. That's shamatha meditation. That'll calm us down. Then we can use compassion meditation in our imagination to imagine that we infuse ourselves and all beings with love and compassion. And then we can use the transformative power of reciting mantra and using visualization to imagine all beings becoming love and becoming compassion itself. So in this way, we can go beyond our grasping world of suffering, because that's what the Buddha said was the root cause of everything, this selfish grasping. And if we can find ways to even poke a little hole in that from time to time, then we will have less suffering and more goodness in our life. But of course, you have to practice. That's the hard part. We have to actually remember to try to do it every day. And so this would be my advice for this week. When you're watching the news, if you find yourself becoming a little on the agitated side, you can use one of these 3 techniques. You can just breathe and be with your breath. Just breathe and be with your breath. Unplug from whatever that stimulus is for fear, that stimulus for anger. Just unplug for it for a minute. And that will give you some strength that you can then take to work with the situation in a constructive way. Because when we're co-opted by anger, when we're co-opted by fear, we're not going to make good decisions. So if we can calm down a minute, then we can engage constructively with action. Because a lot of people ask me, well, how do we take action while all of these things are going on? And I tell people, first, make sure you yourself are working with your own anger. You yourself are working to feel love for yourself and for others. And then you can think about what actions are important and right for you to take. Because otherwise, we'll be just doing what that English term is. Remember the English term knee-jerk reaction? Knee-jerk reaction. We're on autopilot, and we're just acting without thinking. And we need to be we need to be better than that. We need to be better than that, because then we can work with others and maybe even inspire them to do something positive. So my thought is that when you watch the news this week, if it starts to upset you, breathe. Or if it starts to upset you, you can use the out breath and imagine you're sending love and goodness to everybody. You can do that, right? And or you can recite mantra like Om Mani Padme Hum. And this will give you a little bit of relief from the immediate situation so that you can make better decisions and address how you're feeling with a calmer, clearer mind. Because that, if we can cultivate a calmer, clearer mind, then we can make better decisions. Because it's all about taking care of ourselves right now. We have to do the right thing to take care of ourselves so that we can be sources of strength for other people. Because there are people in our lives that need our strength. We know this. There are people who look to us and rely on us. They may be friends, they may be family. And people just need to be together and stay together in times like these, and to commit to helping each other and being present for each other. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I could go on, but that might get boring. What I'm thinking we could do is have some discussion, you know? It's one of the things I enjoy about this, and I've spoken to my friends who are Christian ministers. I say, wouldn't it be great if the pastor took questions at the end of every sermon? Wouldn't that be fun? And they're like, don't think so. You know, they're like, I'm not sure. But it really is helpful. So if anybody has comments or observations or questions or just whatever, we have 2 microphones. Yeah. Hey there. Hey, Paul.
Hey there.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
It's good to be seen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
From a Buddhist perspective, obviously we are instructed to do no harm. Mm-hmm. In the context of warfare, which was the background to this today,
Yeah.
What do Buddhists say about doing harm to people when necessary in order to prevent oneself and, let's say, one's family, loved ones from being harmed or killed? Because is that ever okay? Or is the karma associated with whatever harm I did to an enemy? Is that worse than the karma that would happen if I do nothing and many people suffer?
Yeah. This has actually been a concern for Buddhists since the beginning, because since nonviolence is one of the basic teachings of the Buddha, this type of question has come up from time to time. And in fact, in the Mahayana Sutras, there is a story told about one of the previous lives of the Buddha, because this was one of the gifts, spiritual gifts, that the Buddha Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, had, was he could recall every single one of his previous lives. And so he recounted them, and then they got collected in a group of a piece of literature called the Jataka or Jataka tales. And in one of these episodes, he was a captain on a ship, and there were, dozens and dozens of merchants on this ship, but there was one saboteur on the ship. And the saboteur was going to actually murder all of the merchants and take all of their money, okay? And so I don't know how the person planned to do this, but whatever. The captain became aware of this, and he killed the person. He killed the person to save the lives of all the other merchants. But you see, there's 2 things going on in this story. He did it to save the lives of all of these people, and he also did it knowing that the karma of killing someone was an extremely painful rebirth in an extremely painful environment. We might call it hell. We might call it that. And the story goes, yes, he did suffer that result, but because of the purity of his motivation, he sort of popped out pretty quickly.
I'm glad you brought that up.
He gained a better rebirth not too long after, you know.
No, I'm glad you mentioned it, because that was also wondering about motivation.
Yeah, that's right. So here's the other deal. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche told, because, you know, people, when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche first started teaching in the United States, can you imagine? He was born in 1924 in Tibet, didn't see an airplane until he was doing 3-year retreat and saw one going overhead over the mountains, you know, military aircraft, you know, and like, you know, he had no idea, and he rode in an airplane for the first time in the 1970s. I mean, you know, and so he was not quite ready for our culture. Let's put it that way. But he took so many great questions because somebody asked him, if someone accosts you on the street and wants to steal from you and kill you, what do you do? You're a Buddhist. Are you supposed to just let it happen? And Rinpoche said, well, you do have to be practical. He said, first of all, he said, killing is really wrong and you shouldn't do it. So try to run. And he said, and if that doesn't work, try to disarm the person in some way. And the killing a person is the last resort, you know. But he said you do have to recognize that you're creating some really heavy karma here. But, you know, I think he was trying to find a way to meet our fear, our culturally, you know, instilled fear and concern with a skillful means that would allow us to back up from a confrontation if we needed to, run away from a confrontation if we could, and only use force if necessary. But because this was at the very, very beginning, I'm not 100% sure the translator translated everything because he could not teach in English. He could only teach in Tibetan, and none of us knew it. But that was my best recollection of what he said. So it's that.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Thank you.
It's the best we can do. We're human, and it's going to be messy. That's kind of what I got out of it.
Yeah, I found that out too in my life. That human thing.
Yeah, it's a human thing. Yeah, being human, it's tough. And you'll be next?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, this gentleman here is next. Yeah, and then we'll trade off if that's okay. Yeah, okay. I didn't see who walked up first, so I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Just sort of a tangential question, but something I've been wondering. You know, when we talk about the billions of dollars that are spent to sort of capture our attention, whether by marketing or broadcast media, you know, I have a lot of friends, I'm not in marketing, but I have a lot of friends who are, and I don't think they necessarily have nefarious intentions, of course. However, you know, I wonder in terms of like right livelihood, is it possible to be in one of these industries from a Buddhist perspective and generate merit? How would that even look? Just wondering about your thoughts.
I have no idea, to be honest with you. I think it boils down to 2 or 3 different things. It would be, what is the intention of the person who's doing the job? What are they going to do with the money they earn? You see what I'm saying? So they could, you know, and what are they going to do with the influence they have? When we were in 3-year retreat, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche often spoke to us in English, so I could have it wrong, but he often spoke to us and told us stories. And he said that being famous, he said some people desire it. He said, but it's actually really bad for your karma. He said, because it actually burns up your positive karma very rapidly. So he said, if you're famous, you better be doing something good with your fame, because that is really the only way to perpetuate some kind of goodness for yourself and others, is to use your fame for goodness and for helping people. Now, in terms of marketing, this one's a tougher one, and I'm not sure I could give you a proper answer because I'm not a scholar. But when Khenpo Urgyen Tenzin comes, because he'll be coming in the fall, and he is a scholar, And he will probably be able to quote some things to you that will give you, because what I can quote mostly is Khenpo, since I'm not a scholar, what I mostly can do is quote Khenpo Karthma Rinpoche's teachings. That's the best I can do, and some of the books I've read and remember. But so I would say it's really questionable as to whether a person who's part of that machine is, if that's right livelihood or not, because it is, especially, I'm worried about children, you know, about the harm that comes to children from social media. I'm a little worried about that. So I can't say it's completely blameless, but I also can't say it's completely bad. So I'm a little bit nonplussed. Yeah, but I think that people, really in the end, it does depend, because I was a journalist for 15 years, and I said to Khenpo Rinpoche, I feel so bad, because basically I'm an entertainer. I mean, yes, I'm writing about city council meetings and helping people decide how, you know, what the issues are locally, but I'm also an entertainer, and I feel like that's just not right livelihood. And he said, do not worry about that. He said, use the money you earn to go on, to make offerings and go on Buddhist retreats and benefit your practice and so forth and so on. So he kind of made me feel better about being an entertainer, a paid entertainer. So, but I can't talk about the market. I don't know. I have to ask my buddy. I had a buddy who was in marketing for many years, who was Buddhist. I'll have to ask him kind of how he threaded that needle. That'd be, yeah. Thank you for asking, though. Yes, hi.
It was more of a response to the very good question that Paul raised. And that's, I've heard this question like millions and millions and millions of times. Violence, what I was taught is that violence is an intention, it's mind. Violence is not here, it's
Right.
here.
Exactly, it's in your mind.
Right. Secondarily, I was also taught that the development of wisdom and application of wrath. Wrath is like a great energy.
Oh, I see it, yeah.
Right, coming from pure intention.
Right,
So for example, the tale of Buddha is the captain.
right,
The ability to discriminate what is rightful action arises from being able to control your intention.
exactly.
And part of my understanding that I was given is that withholding wrath is actually one of the secondary downfalls of a bodhisattva's vow.
I understand.
Yeah, so we're
Correct.
actually taught we have to take action so long as we can control our minds.
So long as we control
Yeah.
our mind. Yeah, exactly.
Like a
exactly.
punch is neither a negative nor a positive action. It's the mental action that arises if I wish to harm this person versus say, stop someone. Like if I'm aware that someone is hurting a child
Right,
and I take action to stop that.
yes,
If my intention is to hurt this person, that sucks, that's bad, I'm hurting me. If my intention is to stop them from hurting themselves because abusing another person is terrible karma and I wish to protect them from their terrible karma,
right,
that's a very useful thing and a very helpful thing I just did for them.
right,
But it's all about lojong, it's can I control my mind?
exactly. I really appreciate you saying this. I really appreciate you saying this, because what you're saying makes me really happy. I'm very happy to hear you say this, because we needed to really put a fine point on that intention piece, because the intention, the purer a person's intention is, the better.
Yeah.
But if they don't have a pure intention, then it's a real dangerous situation for them and for everybody else. And so in a way, the only being who can use force is the being who has the perfect mind of love. The only being who can use force is the being who has a perfect mind of love. So we have another question? Do we have another question?
No?
Okay.
All right, shall we sit down?
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to just trade off because I forget I can't see who comes up first. So yes, please. Yeah.
Hi.
Yes.
So I'm in social work, and I help homeless people with disabilities access housing. And a lot of my clients have some like less than savory pasts. And I do the compassion meditation. I try not to judge. I try to meet them where they're at. But after 2 years of doing this, I got my first client who is a blank offender and had some crimes against children. And I've been really having a hard time wanting to help him. I try to do the compassion meditation, but it just gets stuck in my throat. It almost feels bad to wish well upon this person.
I know, yeah.
So I'm not really sure, other than just like keep trying the compassion meditation. I wasn't sure if you had any.
I really understand this because we were just even talking about hurting a child and how horrible that is to every loving, thinking person, how horrible that is. And so I completely understand the conflict you're feeling about this. And while I don't have an easy solution, I'll tell you about a friend of mine and how she came to a solution. It's not the, but it might be helpful. Someone in her family was harming someone, and she became so angry she wanted to harm the person who was doing the harm. And that would have just been terrible because, it's just not a good thing. Eventually, she went to the police, which was the right thing to do. But she was having a really hard time containing her rage. And she could not pray for or do compassion meditation for this person. So if we remember that the person we harm with our withholding of compassion and love is actually ourselves in a way, that helps us to make a commitment to someday. You see what I'm saying? Even if we can't do it today, we might start with the aspiration, may I be able to help people such as this someday. And even just that aspiration is going to make us feel a little bit better. Secondarily, what eventually happened in this situation of the person who recognized that not being able to pray for this person was actually a problem for her. I said, do you have a photograph of this person as a child? And she said, actually, yes, I do. I said, how old is the child in the picture? She said, 4 years old. And I said, okay, good. You can pray for that child. Because something happened to that child to turn them into the person who hurt children. Something had to have happened to turn them into the person who caused harm. And she said that actually helped her to begin to soften a little bit, just as recognizing the torture and pain of the mind of the person and the torture and pain that would be, they would experience in the future. These are not easy things, as I said at the beginning. It's not easy to have a human heart and to love and to feel and to want justice for children, and there's nothing wrong with getting justice for children. But we need to find a way, even if we can't ourselves feel compassion for the people who do harm, what we can do is make the aspiration, someday may I have that. Even if I don't have it now, may I have it someday. And may I find methods to help my heart, to see their suffering as well. But we're just doing the best we can. And I am sorry that this is happening in the world, and that I'm sorry this has to be part of your work, but I'm glad it's part of your work because you obviously care about it incredibly deeply. And so there will always be people we have a hard time, feeling for. So another thing you could do is just pray for the person. Just pray that their heart is opened and that they see what they've done. But that may or may never happen, but still it gives us some strength. Is that helpful?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no, thanks for asking, and let's just keep the conversation going. If you have other things to ask, we can talk. Let's see how we're doing on time. This will be the last question.
Okay, and I
Oh,
also
I'm sorry.
want
I see we have another one. Yeah, no, we'll be good. We'll be good. I can do it.
my name's Rebecca, and I'm a therapist also, and I just want to add, I hope you're practicing self-compassion because you're signing up on the behalf of all of us to do this work, and you're taking on such a burden, and we're all grateful. But you have to have so much self-compassion for how hard this is. My question is, I'm going to have a lot of clients this week who are going to be really upset.
Yeah.
I try not to force Buddhism down my clients' throats,
Yeah.
but they all are aware that it informs my practice.
Sure.
I also have a 21-year-old daughter who's extremely upset.
Yeah.
And whenever I try to talk about Buddhism with her, it's like, right?
Yeah,
like,
I know,
yeah.
right. Well, yeah, I hear that.
So how can we bring sort of those three
Yeah.
refuge,
Yeah.
spaces to a population who isn't steeped in Buddhism and
I get
isn't,
Wow.
Thank you.
I totally get this, and thank you, by the way, for what you've said about this, because I do think we owe a debt of gratitude. In fact, you're going to love this. My teacher, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche, he didn't even know what psychotherapy was. He lived in a agrarian cultural thing. They were shepherds, So they didn't really have this kind of thinking. But when he got to the United States, you know what he said? He said, after talking to students for a while, he said, I have so much respect for therapists. So much respect. He said, because they practice intense patience, they practice intense compassion and openness to listen to people. And he said, I think that is incredibly admirable. Anyway, so just thought I'd tell you that he thought y'all were great. So, people who are not Buddhist, I'm going to tell you a funny story about my own therapist. She's passed away now, but one of the best pieces of advice she gave me was, if you can't get through to a family member, she said, don't worry, somebody eventually will. And she said, most of the people who finally get through to a family member are not the family member. A stranger will walk up and say to them the same thing that you have been saying to them, and they will believe that person and not you. And she said, just take the win. Just take the win. Don't say, I told you so. Don't say, well, why did you listen to them and not to me? She said, just be quiet and take the win. So that's one thing. Okay, so
Planting seeds.
Yes, exactly.
Planting seeds.
So here's the thing. I think that the approach you take with people who aren't Buddhist is all about caring for themselves, self-care. I see how upset this is making you. I see that dwelling on it is not helpful. I learned breathing exercises that can help me. And because I actually did learn breathing exercises from a Tibetan doctor. Maybe I should teach those next time. Maybe let's do that next time I'm talking, which will be, I think, second week in July. I'll bring them, and it's 3 quick meditations for quieting the mind down. So, we'll call it Buddhist adjacent. It's not Buddhism per se, but it's adjacent to Buddhism. And I think that will help. And I think if we can turn them toward caring about themselves and caring for themselves by just taking a breath and spending some time sending goodness out into the world, just silently sending out goodness into the world when their minds are kind of idle. This can be good. I quote Saint Fred, Mr. Rogers. I quote Saint Fred all the time because he spoke specifically and very eloquently about sitting in gratitude for just a few minutes on a regular basis, and sitting in gratitude for all the people, he said, who loved you into existence. And so if that kind of thinking can be placed, that can help. We can't teach Buddhism, but just encouraging people to take care of themselves, I think that's a good beginning. And then just be there and be you.
That too.
Because sometimes, what Kempo Rinpoche said to me, he said, he said, you can't preach Dharma to people. He said, but what you can do is answer the question when they ask you, well, like, what is it, what's so different? You're different. What's different about you? And how are you the way you are? And say, well, maybe it's because I practice meditation. And then,
That's wonderful. Thank you.
yeah, I appreciate the question. Yeah. And this will be the last question. Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you
Good
so
morning.
much, Lama Kathy.
No, thank you.
Your talk really resonated with me today. I was raised religious, like in Christian faith, like many of us, and so since I'm far from that now, even with Buddhism, I find myself like almost with a wall or a resistance to anything that starts to feel like a religious component of Buddhism. Like I'm all about the
I
practices,
understand. I
I'm all about
understand.
the teachings, and then anything that kind of starts to cross over that way,
Yeah,
like something in me just like blocks it.
I understand.
But there was something really beautiful about your talk today about like finding refuge until I reach enlightenment.
Correct.
And it has been on my spirit for probably about 5 years now, the practice of chanting. But when you were talking today about like the breathing, the compassion, and then the mantra practice, I feel drawn to the mantra practice and yet resistant to it at the same time, because
Yeah,
part of me feels like, and I don't mean any offense by this, but like that there's a part of me that doesn't buy into it, or a
I
part of me
understand.
that
yeah, I
feels
understand.
just like it has that religious piece to it.
I understand.
So would you recommend, but it does feel on my spirit to kind of engage with that and explore it, but I want to do it in a way that's both respectful and honoring the practice, while also being aware of the fact that I don't know if I'm in a place where I would be using or saying these sacred words and truly
And what?
having my heart in them, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure.
So I was curious, would you, to kind of explore it, like, does the refuge prayer seem like a good place to start, or would you recommend something different as like a starting
Sure.
place to
Yeah.
kind of touch on all those things, like
Yeah.
open my spirit to it,
Yeah,
and yet stay honoring what the practice is,
yeah,
and yet wrestling with the resistance of it and all
Yeah.
of that.
yeah. Yeah, I think I really appreciate this, and I am conscious of the time, so I'll try to speak briefly. I really appreciate you being so frank about the sort of mixed feelings you have about this. And you're not the first person who has expressed this, and I think it's okay. It's part of being human that we feel these conflicts, because we have value systems that sometimes do clash. It's all right, it's understandable. And eventually we'll decide as to whether you can make a decision about whether the resistance is incredibly important to you, and think about what it's protecting you from. And then eventually over time you might make a different decision about it. Because a friend of mine was saying to me one time, he said, yes, when I have some of these unbidden thoughts come up, I say, oh, how nice of you to come back and try to protect me. Oh, bad habit of my past, how nice, but you can, I've got it from here, you can stand down. But we're not ready to necessarily do that, because it may have been protecting us for a reason. Okay, so there's that. And I understand about the whole idea of religiosity, and we got a problem with that maybe, but if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it could be a duck. But in any case, but I think taking the heart portion of it is the important thing. There's a short prayer that we recite at the beginning of our meditation session called the Prayer of the Four Immeasurables. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they have that great happiness, which is freedom from suffering. May they come to dwell in great equanimity, free of attachment and aversion to those near and far. And I feel like that is a really good prayer to start with.
Yes.
It may even be better than refuge from the standpoint of just being an open-hearted statement of value. You see what I'm saying? And like what you're about. Then in terms of mantra practices have been around for a very, very long time. And I can make a joke and say that we do mantra practice all the time by having these songs we recite over and over again to adjust our mood. I mean, who doesn't turn up the radio when your favorite thing comes on? I mean, and then you do car singing. I think it's a thing, And so we are always using external phenomena or internal phenomena to adjust our mood. You see what I'm saying? So I feel that if you can recite something in a language that's not your own, but you know that it has a symbolism of goodness, just listen to it and then see if listening to it is helpful. And the idea of imagining that you're sending out goodness and things like that. And I don't mind. My teacher, Kempo Karthar Rinpoche, said you don't even have to be Buddhist to chant Om Mani Padme Hung, the compassion mantra. He said it's good. And he said that and the healing Buddha's mantra, that can be chanted by anybody. You don't even have to be Buddhist. He said because it's so beneficial. So I'm thinking the main thing to do is to relax. Be gentle with yourself and don't feel the need to pressure yourself to I know you didn't say this, but get over your resistance. Just relax with all that. Don't practice any pressure on yourself. Okay. Just relax your mind and see what helps you. And do some practice and see if it helps you. And if it helps you, fantastic. If you need help in figuring out how to practice, we've got you covered.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thank you for people bring their sincerity here, and I love that. So, yeah, thanks. Well, because I'm so sorry I ran over time today, but I appreciate you for hanging out and being together during this time. So thank you for being here. And we'll gather together all of the goodness that we have accumulated here. It's a very Buddhist thing to not even keep the benefit for ourselves. We're giving it away. So we'll recite the dedication of merit. There are 2 stanzas here, and we'll just recite them in English, dedicating all the goodness that we have here to the resolution of war and the resolution of hatred in human beings' hearts and the bringing of peace to everyone. So we'll recite this prayer. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thank you, everyone. Be safe out there and have a good afternoon. Stay hydrated. Okay. Om Mani Padme Hung. Thank you, the sound department.